In his first 100 days, Donald Trump has redefined what it means to be the President of the United States. Critics say he's defied the US Constitution, behaved like an authoritarian dictator, restricted free speech, and silenced critics. Today, we finish with a big question. Has Donald Trump redefined the modern American presidency?
I feel like a broken record at this point, but in the United States of America, we do not have kings. We do not have dictators. We have a constitution and the rule of law. And we are going to make damn sure that Donald Trump and his administration follows the law.
I'm Matt Chorley in the Americast studio in London.
I'm Justin Webb, also in what I like to call the worldwide headquarters of Americast in London, England.
And this is Anthony Zerker in the American headquarters of Americast in Washington, D.C.
Right, firstly, I mentioned that Donald Trump's critics say that he's behaving like an authoritarian dictator, but we should dig into what he's actually done. Is it just people just don't like him and therefore it's a way of criticising everything he does? What has he done, Justin?
The first thing that he's done that is really noticeable and kind of separates him out from other recent presidents is the use of executive orders. This thing where a president just decrees something, signs a document, literally signs it in front of people, and then the expectation is that it happens. It's much more complicated than that. Generally, executive orders, and they've been used by other presidents, can get challenged in the courts, and quite a few of Donald Trump's have been. And some of them, in the end, it turns out he doesn't really have the power to do this or that, that he has decreed that he's going to do by executive order. But the very fact of signing swathes of these things, we talked about one the other day on the programme, on the size of shower heads. I mean, it's not just the kind of big constitutional stuff. There's a load of other things as well. Lots of them, as I say, have been challenged, but lots have not. And it is a way of using something that other presidents kind of toyed with a little bit as a real kind of lever of power. And I don't know what Anthony's view is, but I think one of the most kind of salient things about the way Trump is that is different from previous presidents is that.
Anthony, is it partly a reflection of Trump's first presidency, where he tried to operate in what we'd call the usual ways, and he felt he didn't get done what he wanted to get done, and so he's hit the ground running? But we'll just do all executive orders. I'll sit at my desk, I'll sign them all. Some of them are signalling to his base that he's concerned about plastic straws or shower heads or whatever it is. Other things much bigger. But is it a sign that he's learned something from his first presidency?
I think it is. And when you talk to Donald Trump's supporters and some of his advisors, they'll say the same thing. They'll say, they hated the fact that they lost in 2020, but that it was a blessing in disguise in some ways, that it gave them 4 years to sit back and say, okay, this is what we did right. This is what we did wrong. These were the obstacles that we ran into when we tried to do all of this in the first term. And so when they got to the first 100 days here in Donald Trump's second term, they've been able to move much quicker and use the levers, as Justin mentioned, the levers of power that the president does have, particularly control over spending, control over the vast sums of money that the federal government, the executive branch, distributes to different organizations and groups, and use that as a cudgel to enact policy changes.
And how much of that is just what all presidents do, maybe dialed up to 11, maybe with more noise, and how much of it is stretching that constitution to the point of being authoritarian, as his critics talk about?
I think a lot of it is much farther than we've seen any president, even Republican presidents. If you go back to George W. Bush, what he did, I mean, he operated well within the bounds of kind of the traditional modern American presidency. If he didn't like an agency or a department or what they were doing, his people still spent the money that Congress appropriated for. He still kept those offices and programs. Donald Trump has said, we're just not going to spend the money, which is of questionable legality. The Congress is supposed to have the power over determining what gets funded and what programs get set up and what agencies and departments get created. But Donald Trump and his people have totally changed that. And they've also used federal grant money, federal spending to bend, say, law offices, legal teams to his will. So you have all of these law firms that are populated often by by Democrats and various people who were former government officials. They have had to change the way they operate because Donald Trump has threatened to shut them out of access to the government. And so that's been a very effective and unique to Donald Trump way of using the powers of the executive branch.
So that's what he's done, Justin. How significant is this? If no one has governed like this before, how is it? How much of it is Donald Trump genuinely trying to reshape America, and how much of it is him just pushing? It's just noise, flood the zone, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a way in which you go down a road so far that presidencies to come will say, well, hold on, here is the precedent, and it was the precedent of the Donald Trump term. So yes, I think there is a way in which he's stepped across a mark that previous presidents didn't step across, and particularly actually on the whole national security and treatment of citizens who are in the United States, whether they're Americans or not. And there's this kind of sense in which he is willing to press these things, and presidents in the future who are faced with what they regard as emergencies might go down the same road.
Justin, how much of it is a reflection of the sort of crisis in democracy we've seen in lots of countries, of politicians of all colours for some time saying we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and then it doesn't happen, and then they get thrown out. Some other people come in and say the same thing.
That's a really important point, because that then goes to whether he actually is acting from a position of power or whether he's acting from a position of a political system having broken down, which is a slightly different thing. And I think it's quite a lot the latter. You look at Congress. The Congress is meant to be doing a lot of the things that Donald Trump is doing or trying to do. Congress is meant to have not just a view. Congress is meant to pass laws that do X, Y, or Z. Donald Trump is very weak in Congress because the Republicans are very weak in Congress. The Republicans are very split in Congress. And it's very difficult, although they've got majorities in both the lower house and the upper house of Congress, it is really difficult for them to get anything through and done. So you could argue that the Trump presidency, in a sense, is a sign of weakness, his weakness, in the light of a political collapse where everything feels parliamentary but without a parliamentary system. In other words, everyone's going off in all sorts of directions. The only thing they kind of coalesce around at all is him, because it's an easy thing to do. And that's not a sort of normal political situation. So in other words, if you're looking at the Trump presidency and saying, has everything changed forever? Maybe it hasn't. Maybe this is a particular moment in time where politics is so messed up in the United States that things have gone to where they are, but they're not necessarily going to stay there.
Do we think does he know what he's doing? In the sense that, is it all part of a grand plan?
Yes. Heritage 2025.
Chaos for 100 days, but setting in train various things which might come good during his presidency. Or is he finding it actually more difficult than he imagined, Justin?
I think there are certain core things about him that he is doing. There are certain core things about Trump. Immigration as well is one of them, where he is doing what he has long believed that he wanted to do.
Yeah, I think he knows what he wants. I don't think he always knows how to get there. I think there are people around him who know what they're doing and have agendas that they're pursuing. But yes, tariffs, immigration, those have been things that Donald Trump has been talking about for a very long time. And finally now, the second time around, he doesn't have the people who are blocking him, keeping him from really going full bore on them the way he had in his first term.
It doesn't in terms of the personnel around, but what about the role of the courts, Anthony, in the constitutional apparatus? He has found that he doesn't have the supreme power of doing exactly what he wants as president. How strong are the courts in those sort of checks and balances?
Yeah, if, as Justin mentioned, Congress is not putting up much of a fight, much of a resistance to Donald Trump taking on power that should be held by Congress, the courts have been an obstacle, particularly with some of Donald Trump's attempts to cut the federal government, cut federal programs, some of his more aggressive moves on immigration. I think we're going to see a challenge on tariffs that might be successful in paring back the presidential power on that. The problem with relying on the courts to be the main check on Donald Trump is that they move slowly. The process of court cases and appeals and rulings and decisions and reviews, they happen over the course of months and years, while Donald Trump is moving at the speed of hours and days. And so he does something, has some effectiveness. He ships people off to an El Salvadorian prison, and the court says you can't do that. Well, there are already hundreds of people there, and it's very difficult to bring them back. And so that's, that is an advantage that Donald Trump has in moving first and asking permission later, and then courts step in and say, no, you can't do that. And Donald Trump will say, well, we're kind of trying to do that, or they find ways of not necessarily directly obeying what the court is saying, but not directly defying it either. There's a good lawyer will find, as you know, wiggle room in any court decision. And I think that's what we've seen from Donald Trump so far.
See, I think that is the absolute the core of everything we've just been discussing. At some stage, does the Supreme Court say, you, Donald Trump, and your immediate officers must do X, and he doesn't do it, and they find him in contempt? And if Anthony sitting there in Washington was found in contempt of court, would be in a lot of trouble and could be hauled off to prison. How much trouble in that case would Donald Trump be in? Would his immediate senior advisors be in if they're individually held in contempt? And it seems to me that is the moment that crystallizes whether this is a presidency that is completely unbound or not.
Yeah. And then to end then with our starting thought about whether or not he's redefined the modern American presidency, looking ahead, what do the next 100 days look like? Is that the path we're set on, Anthony?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a Donald Trump versus the courts battle eventually. And all of these different cases, they're all working their way through. And it all could very well end up in the Supreme Court, where they're issuing decisions. And the test, as Justin rightly points out, is will Donald Trump follow the rule of the court, or will he disregard it? But that is something that the next 100 days and the next several years, I think, will tell us.
Okay, let's end it there. Thank you to Justin and Anthony, and it's great to be in the Americast gang with you both. Remember, you can listen to the whole series, looking back on Trump's first 100 days on BBC Sounds or wherever you listen to your podcast. Just search for Americast to find all the episodes.